Proportional Response, Book 1, Chapter 26, Part 1, A Tricky Exit. Hey. The words sounded choked, even a little forced. Eldia felt a hand on her head and started awake, then had to check herself to keep from leaping from chair to bed as the voice behind the word registered. "He's awake!" Her heart, which had almost refused to operate the last 2 weeks, began to hammer in her chest. She sat in a chair in Henry's hospital room, the one she'd scarcely left since they arrived, with her hands on the bed beside him, and her head on her hands so that she faced the top of the bed. And, now, his hand moved down to cup her jaw, while his thumb ran up and down her cheek. One hand flashed out from under her head and gripped that hand while she opened her eyes, looked into his. 2 weeks since she'd seen those eyes open. 2 weeks, her vision blurred as tears began to fall. He smiled at her and tried to speak, but only an odd, strangled noise came out. He worked his mouth a little and finally managed to croak out a single word. "Water. Dot." She pushed back a stray thought about Arabso croaking for water and brought a straw to his lips. She'd been told it would give him water at a carefully metered rate to prevent choking. He latched onto it, and she saw the thing begin to buckle under the suction he pulled on it when the first moisture hit his tongue. She tried to use her best soothing tone, but had to beat back sobs to do so. "Slowly, love. Easy. The machine knows what you need and what you don't. Trust it, relax. Swallow when you feel you can and hold your breath a little longer than you think you need. There. Yes. Just relax." A door to the room opened and the nurse who had been assigned to him approached. The woman was human and built like, well, she was broader in the shoulder than any Venter woman Eldia had ever seen, at least. Except maybe Golner, but the nurse stopped a few feet from the bed and gave a small smile. "Ah, good, Mr. Archer, you are awake. A little ahead of when we expected, but that is okay. You are probably rather groggy, as well as thirsty." Henry nodded, and she continued. "Well, it seems your stalwart lady here has you using the straw properly. You just lay back and relax. We'll have you on your feet in no time. Now, just a couple of questions for you at this point. Do you feel any pain?" Henry shook his head, then winced. The nurse gave a sympathetic smile. "Only when you move?" Henry nodded this time with exaggerated care. "That is to be expected, and is a good sign, really. Could you give me a brief wink with each eye?" Henry did as asked. It took him a moment to get the left one. The nurse pulled out her ever-present datapad, poked it a few times, and continued without looking up. "Excellent, thank you. Now, a little wiggle of your fingers and toes, one appendage at a time, please." Henry complied, and her gaze went back and forth between him and the pad. When he finished, she made a few more taps, then smiled. "Thank you. The doctor will be in here shortly to explain the next steps. In the meantime, are you comfortable?" Henry nodded. "Feel like trying to eat something soft?" Henry smiled at the thought, then frowned and shook his head. The nurse gave him another small smile. "Not surprising." The woman then turned slightly and made it clear she wanted to address them both. "Rest and sleep are the best things right now. Talking is okay, but try not to talk too much and try to avoid any stressful topics. We will bring you some soft foods as soon as you feel you can stomach them, and the red button on your left will give you a dose of painkiller. Let us know if you need anything, sir." She gave a nod, which seemed almost like a fractional bow, and left. Eldia didn't know at what point she'd actually sat up, but she turned back to Henry. They looked at one another and she let the tears fall. He tried to reach up to wipe her cheek, but grimaced and settled for a weak smile. She ran a hand down the side of his face and leaned in a little. "Don't do that to me ever again. Please, I can't take it. No more heroics, no more." He managed to put a finger on her lips, and she kissed it. She then looked into his eyes and saw pain. Not the pain of his body, but pain that she heard. She also saw resolve, some sadness and questions. Mostly questions. She caressed his cheek. "There will be no more need for heroics either, my love. It is over. You have been out for 2 weeks because they kept you in a medically induced coma, and, well, A lot of technicalities. Suffice it to say, you have received a level of care unheard of in sapient space, up to and including the fact that the nurse who just walked in here is assigned to you, and only you. You've had an entire team of doctors debating on your treatment several hours a day, but one doctor, a human, who is in charge. Stop shifting, darling. You'll damage something. They stressed that you need to move as little as possible for the first day or two after you woke, and then you should move slow and with great care. She reached up to stroke his hair. Anyway, that is not what you want to hear about, at least not first, is it? Well, suffice to say that it is over. There hasn't been a single shot fired since the day you were injured. In a lot of ways, you could say that not much has happened since then. Everyone. She shook her head. No. You know what? Just no. I can't tell you how many times the last 2 weeks I was afraid I lost you, how many times that nurse, sometimes with some of the doctors, rushed in here and started applying gizmos to you or sticking that four with needles. I'm not going to have you getting worked up over the state of the galaxy now and going back down. They said that they kept you unconscious because they were using semi-experimental and very expensive treatments to not just keep you alive but get you on your feet quickly. They also claimed that if you did wake up today like they expect, that they'd expect you to be recovered enough to walk, stand, and give speeches in under 2 weeks. But I know you, and you will stress yourself if you don't at least know the basics. So, the most important thing, the fighting has stopped, dear. The war is over, and we have incontrovertibly won. Spectacularly won, even. The Duke, my nephew, and the rest of our little group of aliens have matters well in hand, and there is nothing out there that can't wait a couple of weeks for you to deal with. A knock sounded on the door, and she looked over to see Enable poke his head in. He then rushed in, closed the door, hurried over to them, went around the bed, and laid his hand over Henry's free hand. Enable's face hardened under his tears. So help me, if I ever hear anyone tell me that you've been considered as any sort of expendable again, I may find my ability to do violence. Please don't do that to us again, brother. Eldia didn't even suppress her wry look as Henry gave her nephew a weak smile. He tried to shrug and thought better of it before he moved much. She shifted slightly, and Enable looked over at her to see a single arched eyebrow. He needs to relax. All of that can wait until later. Her nephew seemed to get the message and his face softened. I know you are going to want to get up and move too soon, and probably want some news too soon. You need to rest a few more days, a couple of weeks at most. They are trying to heal you as fast as they can. Another voice came from the doorway. Faster than humanly possible, really. The doctor walked in. He seemed to be a somewhat older man, with no hair on his head at all. Eldia had to admit that she liked the guy, almost in spite of herself. He had a calm, gentle manner, but steel will and a sharp mind lay underneath. The doctor walked over to Henry, looked at his monitors, looked at his eyes, pulled the sheets up, and looked over all of the healing injuries. At least he is back to his own color, not just a patchwork of bruises. You are a distinctly high-value patient, Mr. Archer. The Confederation has spared no expense, monetary or political, to get you back on your feet as quickly as possible. Injuries like you came in with should have kept you on bed rest for a few months. But you are going to be up in a few weeks. I can detail the treatment if you like, or leave it at that. A subtle tone made it clear the doctor expected Henry to leave it alone, but her beloved croaked out a single word. Explain. So, the doctor found a seat and did so. The man began speaking a bunch of jargon so steep that even the top-end translator, which she'd requisitioned to dignitaries who bullied their way past everyone else at bay, finally gave up. The doctor spoke in a dead, almost hypnotic monotone, and Eldia found herself fighting sleep. Henry, however, seemed content to listen. After 15 minutes, Henry took a slightly deeper breath and asked, with a voice that seemed to be gaining strength, a question that she couldn't follow. The doctor sat back a little and blinked rapidly, and she looked back over to Henry to see a challenge in his eyes. Trying to bore my man to sleep, doctor? Really? He has served in the council chamber for years. The doctor continued, in a more normal speech pattern for a little while, and finally seemed to wind down. So, there you have it, Mr. Archer. Relax. Mind and body. Sleep as much as your body will let you, and you will recover fast. Try to push it at all, and... Henry nodded. I understand. Thank you, Doctor. Now I think I'm going to sleep. With that, Henry's head sank back a little, his eyes closed, and his breathing evened out. The doctor watched his datapad for a few moments, seemed satisfied, nodded to them, and walked out. Eldia looked over at her nephew and sighed. Yes, we need to tell him, and yes, he will be upset. We didn't tell him any of it sooner, when we finally do. But you heard the doctor, and you know, even better than I do, what the galaxy needs. Hannibal nodded. Yes. They need to see him at full strength. Seeing him with an injury still healing is fine, but he must appear strong. Hopefully he will forgive us. She gave him a wry smile. Oh, he will forgive us, and right quickly too. It may be a lifetime before he forgives the universe, however. Hannibal stood. She could see the weariness in his motions. His vigil has been worse than mine, in some ways. At least I get to stay here with Henry. Too much truth. There. Now I need to go have a few dozen one-on-one conversations with heads of state and other over-important people, and assure them that I have seen the hero statesman with my own eyes, and that he's recovering.